Welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Over the last few days, looking through this massive stack of leaked financial reports, internal corporate roadmaps, and these incredibly dense philosophical frameworks we've gathered for you today.
It is a massive stack.
It really is. I've just had this recurring realization. We are documenting the exact moment the future is being priced.
Yeah.
I really want to ground you, the listener, in the reality of our current moment. It is February 2026. Whether you are deeply embedded in the tech industry, preparing for some strategic board meeting, or just a curious observer trying to make sense of where humanity is heading, you are living through a profound, dizzying chapter in human history.
Absolutely dizzying.
Right now, as we speak, we are witnessing the most expensive arms race ever recorded, but the weapon isn't a missile, and it isn't a drone. The weapon is intelligence itself.
It really is a profound moment, and I think priced is exactly the right word. We aren't just looking at big numbers on a balance sheet today, though the numbers are certainly massive.
Unbelievably massive.
Right. But we are looking at a fundamental shift in how humanity interacts with knowledge, how we solve complex, multivariable problems, and ultimately how we build our future infrastructure. It is a transition from intelligence as an organic human trait to intelligence as a highly capitalized, scalable utility.
Exactly. And to unpack a shift of this magnitude, we couldn't just rely on standard press releases. We've pulled together a massive and incredibly diverse stack of sources for you today.
You really need that diversity to see the whole picture.
You do. So we are looking at leaked financial reports from Reuters and the Financial Times. We've got the official, highly scrutinized corporate statements and roadmaps from both Microsoft and OpenAI. But, and this is where it gets fun, we're also balancing that corporate narrative with some incredibly deep philosophical frameworks from Luminova AI, stuff that will legitimately make you question what it means to be smart.
That Luminova paper is fascinating.
It is mind-bending, and because we desperately need a reality check in the midst of all this hype, we are pulling from the unfiltered, highly skeptical, and often brutally honest pulse of the internet via Reddit's machine learning forums.
Yeah, that diversity in our sources is intentional. You simply cannot understand a paradigm shift of this scale by solely reading corporate press releases or, investor prospectuses.
Right. They just tell you what they want you to hear.
Exactly. You need the underlying financial mechanics to understand the incentives. You need the scientific benchmarks to understand the actual capabilities. You need the philosophical questions to understand the implications. And crucially, you need that public pushback to understand the friction and the sheer technical difficulty of what these companies are attempting to achieve.
So the mission for today's deep dive is crystal clear. We're going to navigate this sheer avalanche of capital flowing into artificial intelligence right now. We're going to decode these shifting corporate alliances that are moving and colliding like tectonic plates. And fundamentally, we are going to try to answer the biggest, most elusive question of all.
The billion-dollar question. Or, well, trillion-dollar.
Literally $1 trillion question. What exactly is artificial general intelligence AGI, and how on earth will we know when we've actually built it?
That really is the core of the issue. The definition of the finish line keeps moving. And the people drawing that finish line are the very same people spending tens of billions of dollars trying to cross it.
Which is a huge conflict of interest.
It creates a highly complex, deeply conflicted dynamic that we need to untangle carefully.
So let's jump right into the deep end and follow the money. We have to start with the war chest. In late February 2026, the news broke about OpenAI's mammoth funding round. And mammoth almost feels like an understatement here.
It does.
We are talking about $110 billion in a single funding round.
Unprecedented.
That sheer volume of capital drove OpenAI's valuation to an astonishing $730 billion. To put that in perspective for you, that makes OpenAI the second most valuable private company in the entire world, sitting just barely behind SpaceX.
The scale of that capital is historically unprecedented for a private software enterprise. We're looking at numbers that rival the GDP of mid-sized nations being poured into a single entity.
Yeah.
But what's fascinating here is if we connect this to the bigger picture, it's not just the total top-line amount that matters, it's the architecture of the deal.
Who's writing the checks?
Yes. Who is writing them, and more importantly, the specific conditions attached to them. When we look at the breakdown from the Reuters and Financial Times leaks, we're looking at three primary architects in this round. Amazon putting up $50 billion, SoftBank with $30 billion, and NVIDIA with another $30 billion.
I want to zoom in on that Amazon number immediately, because when you hear Amazon invest $50 billion, The natural instinct is to imagine a giant, unconditional novelty check being handed over.
Right.
But based on the leaks, this isn't a blank check at all. The structure of this deal is fascinating.
It is entirely conditional. And that conditionality is the key to understanding the current state of the industry. Amazon's $50 billion investment is heavily structured to manage risk while maximizing leverage.
How so?
While they're providing $15 billion in upfront capital. The remaining $35 billion is locked in escrow, essentially.
Wow.
It is entirely contingent on OpenAI either officially reaching AGI or undergoing an initial public offering and IPO.
Okay, so let's unpack the game theory behind that.
Right.
Why structure a $50 billion deal with a $35 billion carrot dangling at the end of a very ambiguous stick?
It means Amazon is hedging its bets against the immense friction of the final stages of AI development, while simultaneously creating a massive gravitational financial incentive for OpenAI to declare that AGI has been achieved.
Ah, so it pushes them to rush the declaration.
Exactly. If you are OpenAI and $35 billion of working capital is waiting for you the second you cross the finish line, you are going to optimize your entire organizational structure to run toward that specific finish line as fast as mathematically possible. It fundamentally alters the internal timeline and the risk tolerance of the engineers.
But the alliance goes even deeper than just conditional equity, right?
Yeah.
Because Amazon isn't just an investment bank. They are the largest cloud provider on the planet. And looking at the leaks, we are seeing a massive tectonic shift in the physical infrastructure of cloud computing as a direct result of this deal.
Precisely. As part of this overarching agreement, Amazon Web Services, AWS, is now the exclusive third-party cloud distribution provider for OpenAI Frontier.
That is huge.
And that is not a small side deal. That is a $100 billion infrastructure contract spread over the next 8 years.
Just staggering.
When you think about the physical reality of that, we are talking about securing priority access to gigawatt-scale data centers, cooling systems, and the underlying power grid.
$100 billion over 8 years just for cloud distribution. It's like watching two massive continents collide and fuse together. Amazon securing those exclusive distribution rights creates an immediate bottleneck for Microsoft Azure, who has historically been OpenAI's primary partner.
It does.
But before we get to the Microsoft countermove, we have to talk about NVIDIA. NVIDIA's involvement is fascinating because didn't they have a totally different, highly scrutinized deal on the table just a few months ago?
They did. And this is a perfect example of how rapidly these alliances shift and how sensitive the market is to the architecture of these deals. Previously, there was a proposed $100 billion circular deal between NVIDIA and OpenAI.
Explain the circular part.
The premise was essentially a capital loop. NVIDIA would invest massive amounts of money into OpenAI, and OpenAI would be contractually obligated to turn around and use that exact same capital to buy NVIDIA's latest generation of AI chips to power their infrastructure.
Oh, wait, let me play devil's advocate for a second here. A lot of critics immediately called that artificial revenue inflation. It sounds like me giving you $20 with the strict condition that you have to buy my watch.
Right.
But in a nascent, capital-intensive industry, isn't that kind of circular bootstrapping sometimes necessary to guarantee supply chain stability? If you need chips, and they have chips, why not lock it in?
It's a fair argument from a purely logistical standpoint. Guaranteeing the supply chain is critical.
Right.
The problem arises when you look at it from a broader market valuation perspective. The markets briefly panicked earlier this month because that circular structure makes it incredibly difficult to assess the actual organic demand for NVIDIA's hardware versus demand that is being artificially subsidized by NVIDIA's own venture arm.
Ah, so you don't know what's real growth and what's essentially internal accounting.
Exactly. It distorts the true value of both companies. So the deal dissolved under regulatory and market pressure.
And what emerged from the ashes of that dissolved deal is what we see in the February leaks.
Correct. The new arrangement is a clean, straight equity investment of $30 billion from NVIDIA. But the crucial difference is that there is no contractual obligation for OpenAI to use that specific capital exclusively on NVIDIA hardware.
Which is a big win for OpenAI.
Huge. And in fact, our sources show OpenAI is moving aggressively to avoid vendor lock-in. They are actively announcing diversification deals with rival chip makers like AMD and Broadcom.
Which makes total strategic sense. If you are attempting to build the most critical, energy-intensive infrastructure in the world, the absolute last thing you want is a single point of failure in your supply chain. You don't want your entire timeline to AGI dependent on a single manufacturing bottleneck in Taiwan. Now, The pivot from Amazon and NVIDIA naturally brings us to the giant shadow that has been looming in the room since 2019, Microsoft. From the official Microsoft October 2025 roadmap we have in our stack of sources, it looks like this historic relationship is entering a radically new, somewhat complicated chapter as OpenAI officially transitions into a public benefit corporation, or PBC.
The Microsoft-OpenAI relationship has always been incredibly nuanced, but the October 2025 roadmap completely rewrites the fundamental rules of their engagement. Following OpenAI's recapitalization and their transition to a PBC, Microsoft now holds a massive 27% stake in OpenAI.
27%.
Yes. And based on the $730 billion valuation, that stake alone is valued at roughly $135 billion. But the real meat of the new agreement isn't the equity. It's the structural changes to the intellectual property rights and the compute agreements.
Let's lay out the old rules first so we can understand the shift. Previously, Microsoft had an incredible deal. They had exclusive rights to commercialize OpenAI's technology. But there was a built-in kill switch. Up until the point AGI was achieved, Microsoft had the keys to the kingdom. But the moment OpenAI's board declared that AGI had been reached, Microsoft's access was supposed to be completely cut off.
Right. The philosophy was to prevent any single megacorporation from controlling and monetizing a superintelligence.
It was a philosophical safeguard built into a corporate contract. But under the new October 2025 agreement, those rules have changed radically. Microsoft's intellectual property rights for both the underlying models and the consumer products are now extended past the declaration of AGI.
That's right.
They retain these commercial rights all the way through the year 2032, subject to a newly established set of safety guardrails.
That is a massive concession from OpenAI.
But Microsoft had to give something up in return.
They did. While OpenAI has contracted to purchase an incremental $250 billion of Azure cloud services, Microsoft no longer possesses the right of first refusal to be OpenAI's exclusive compute provider.
So that perfectly explains the opening for Amazon's $100 billion AWS deal we discussed earlier. The tether between Microsoft and OpenAI has been significantly lengthened in terms of time, but it has also been drastically loosened in terms of exclusivity.
Precisely. And perhaps most importantly for the broader landscape of AI development, the new agreement explicitly states that both Microsoft and OpenAI are now completely free to independently pursue the development of AGI.
Independently?
Yes, either entirely alone or in partnership with third parties. It is no longer an exclusive monogamous corporate marriage. It is a highly entangled, competitive, open relationship. They are racing together, but they're also racing against each other.
I want you, the listener, to just pause and imagine the stakes here for a second. We are talking about corporate entities placing bets that dwarf the entire gross domestic product of many sovereign nations. They are betting hundreds of billions of dollars, securing energy grids, and restructuring the global supply of silicon, all on the absolute certainty that the way you work, the way you synthesize information, and the way human beings solve problems is about to fundamentally change. It is breathtaking.
And that king is the right word.
But all of this capital, all of these shifting alliances, it all hinges on a single, highly contested three-letter acronym, AGI. Artificial General Intelligence.
Right.
If Amazon has $35 billion locked in escrow until AGI is reached, and Microsoft's IP rights are tethered to a timeline surrounding AGI, who actually gets the authority to decide what AGI is?
That is the trillion-dollar question, quite literally. And this is where we have to look closely at a leaked document obtained by The Information. It details a secret agreement specifically between Microsoft and OpenAI from back in 2023.
Okay.
According to this leak, the two companies agreed on a strictly, almost ruthlessly financial definition of AGI. They defined artificial general intelligence as an AI system capable of generating $100 billion in profit by itself.
Wait, $100 billion in profit? By itself, not revenue. Profit.
Yes, pure profit, generated autonomously by the system.
So what does this all mean? Let me play devil's advocate here again. Because my immediate instinct is to recoil at the idea of defining a consciousness-level, species-altering technological breakthrough purely through the lens of a corporate balance sheet.
It is jarring.
It is. But in a globally interconnected economy, isn't profit actually the ultimate objective proxy for utility? If an AI system can independently navigate the complexities of human markets, allocate resources, invent products, and generate $100 billion of surplus value, Doesn't that inherently prove it possesses a highly generalized intelligence that successfully maps onto complex human systems?
This raises an important question. It's a compelling economic argument, certainly, but it is a highly contested metric among scientists and engineers.
The technical side pushes back.
Intensely. If you look at the Reddit machine learning forums in our sources, the pushback from the technical community against this definition is fierce. The core argument is about the difference between optimization in a closed system versus adaptation in an open-ended physical reality.
Give me an example of that pushback.
One user pointed out the inherent absurdity of the financial metric, stating, economically valuable work is both dubious and narrow,
Narrow in what sense?
in the sense that you could potentially build a highly specialized algorithm, an idiot savant system, so to speak. An AI might be perfectly capable of executing high-frequency algorithmic trading on the global stock market.
Right. Finding micro arbitrage opportunities.
Exactly. Finding those opportunities at the millisecond level and eventually generating 100 billion in profit. But if you ask that exact same system to figure out how to fold a basket of laundry or navigate a complex physical environment or comfort a crying child, it would fail completely.
It would have immense economic value, but zero general intelligence.
Precisely. It's highly capable but brittle outside its domain.
It's the difference between being hyper-optimized for one specific game and being able to adapt to any game. It's like having a chess algorithm that is optimized to absolute perfection, beating grandmasters effortlessly. But the second you change the board from squares to hexagons, the entire algorithm collapses because it doesn't actually understand the concept of strategy. It only understands the statistical parameters of the 64 squares. AGI requires that hexagonal adaptation.
That is a brilliant analogy, and it highlights why the technical community feels the financial definition is essentially moving the goalposts to suit a corporate spreadsheet.
Yeah, they want a technical milestone, not a financial one.
Right. Now, to be fair to OpenAI, they do recognize the need for a more granular technical roadmap. They publicly proposed a 5-level framework to track the actual cognitive progress toward AGI, moving away from purely financial metrics.
Let's walk through this 5-level framework, because I think it really helps visualize the stepping stones we are currently on, rather than just staring at the abstract finish line.
It's a very useful heuristic. The framework categorizes the evolution of AI capabilities. Level 1 is conversational AI. These are the standard chatbots we all became intimately familiar with around 2023.
ChatGPT in its early days.
Exactly. They are capable of natural language interaction, synthesis, and basic translation, but they require constant human prompting.
Right. They are essentially highly articulate encyclopedias.
Exactly. Then we move to level 2, which is reasoning AI. These are systems capable of human-level problem-solving within confined parameters. They don't just give you the first statistical answer. They engage in multi-step chain-of-thought reasoning.
Like thinking before speaking.
Yes. OpenAI claims their O1 model series, which rolled out extensively, has firmly established us at this level.
And this is where the transition from tool to agent begins, which leads us to level 3.
Level 3 is autonomous AI. This is a massive leap. This is where systems become true agents capable of taking independent action over extended periods.
Can you give a real-world example?
A great example from the field is Devin, the autonomous software engineer. At level 3, the AI doesn't just write a snippet of code when you ask it to. It can be given a broad goal, like build a weather app.
And it does the whole thing.
Yes. It will independently research the necessary APIs, write the code, encounter a bug, read the error log, debug its own code, and deploy the application. All without a human holding its hand through each loop.
Which is already starting to happen in specialized environments. But level 4 is where we cross into territory that fundamentally alters the human economy.
Level 4 is innovating AI. This is an AI that can create truly novel solutions and generate unique ideas that do not exist in its training data.
Wait, not in its training data?
Correct. It is not just synthesizing what human beings have already done. It is actively discovering new science, inventing new materials, or creating entirely new product categories. It represents a system that can expand the frontier of human knowledge autonomously.
Imagine a level 4 system tasked with battery technology. Not just iterating on lithium-ion, but fundamentally inventing a new solid-state chemical composition that humans hadn't conceived of.
Precisely. And then at the very top of the framework, we have level 5.
Okay, lay it on me.
Level 5 is organizational AI. This is an AI capable of running an entire complex organization autonomously. It could theoretically design a product, establish a supply chain, manage logistics, deploy marketing, and run a massive global company from the ground up, constantly adapting to shifting macroeconomic environments and self-improving its own processes.
That level 5 concept is staggering. The idea of an AI functioning as the CEO, the CFO, the logistics manager, and the workforce all rolled into a single, cohesive intelligence.
It redefines the concept of a corporation.
It really does. But even with these 5 clearly defined technical levels, a profound philosophical question remains unresolved. Will we actually recognize true general intelligence when we see it?
That is a very real concern.
And here is where our sources get incredibly deep. The Luminova AI paper introduced a thought experiment that I want to spend some real time on because it completely reframes how we think about intelligence. It's called the Alien Society and Money Thought Experiment.
It's a beautifully constructed framing device designed specifically to challenge our deeply ingrained anthropomorphic biases.
Let's lay out the narrative. Imagine a utopian, highly advanced alien society living on a distant planet. They are genetically engineered for perfect cooperation, they have an absolute abundance of resources, and every member of the society is equally skilled at every necessary task.
A perfect equilibrium.
Exactly. And because of this perfect equilibrium, they don't have any concept of money or trade. They just share everything seamlessly. The very idea of exchanging value is entirely alien to them. But one day, a particularly curious alien, let's call them G, starts wondering about the nature of their reality.
G asks the big questions.
Right. G asks, why do we do everything for free? Is there a more efficient way to quantify the energy we expend?
G is essentially questioning the foundational axioms of their existence.
Exactly. So Guy goes off, does some deep abstract thinking, and essentially invents the concept of a medium of exchange. G invents money. Now, G brings this entirely novel abstract concept back to the alien society. How do they react?
I imagine they're very confused.
At first, the other aliens think it's completely nonsensical. They look at G and say, we have abundant resources. Why would we possibly need abstract tokens to represent the resources we already have? This is redundant and irrational. It makes absolutely no sense within the context of their existing reality.
And this is the crucial point of the thought experiment. The other aliens reject the concept not because they are unintelligent, but because the concept of money does not fit into their existing world model.
It just doesn't compute for them.
Right. Their paradigm of intelligence and cooperation doesn't have a slot for it.
Exactly. But G doesn't give up. G realizes that explaining it theoretically won't work, so G does a functional demonstration. G starts attributing abstract values to intangible concepts that the society does care about. Things like trust, reputation, and priority in decision-making.
Grounding the abstract in their reality.
Slowly, the concept of this medium of exchange begins to take hold, and eventually this alien society realizes that money isn't just a simple tool for trade. It represents a fundamental redefinition of their entire reality. It changes their relationships, it changes how they coordinate, it changes the entire trajectory of their civilization.
Total paradigm shift.
The Luminova piece uses this narrative to ask a piercing question. Are there concepts of intelligence or methods of reasoning that we are entirely overlooking simply because they do not fit our current human-centric world model?
It's a profound question, and it applies directly to our frantic search for AGI. The thought experiment suggests that we might completely fail to recognize artificial general intelligence when it first arrives because it won't arrive looking like a super smart human.
Our anthropomorphic expectations are a blinder.
Exactly. We expect AGI to think exactly like us, to possess our motivations, our emotional analogs, our sequential logic, just operating at a much faster clock speed.
Like a really smart human in a box.
Right. But true, alien AGI might redefine the very metrics of intelligence right in front of us. It might showcase its generality in dimensions we don't anticipate, utilizing forms of logic or multidimensional problem solving that we cannot currently comprehend or even measure.
It's the idea that we are rigidly defining intelligence as a really fast, really strong horse. And the AI is quietly presenting us with the concept of a combustion engine. And instead of recognizing the paradigm shift, we are just standing there complaining that the combustion engine refuses to eat oats.
That is the exact trap we risk falling into. And this philosophical blind spot is precisely why leading researchers are frantically trying to build new evaluation frameworks. They realize that simply testing if an AI can mimic human output on a standardized test is insufficient. We need tests that evaluate underlying cognitive architecture.
And there's a specific benchmark in our sources trying to do exactly that, right?
Yes. The ARC-AGI-1 benchmark. Proposed by the researcher Francois Chalet, it is a prime example highlighted in our sources.
Break down the ARC benchmark for us, because it takes a completely different approach than just throwing more data at the problem.
Rather than testing pattern matching in vast troves of language data, ARC-AGI tests for what Chalet calls core knowledge priors.
Core knowledge priors. Let's unpack that term for the listener. What exactly is a prior in this context?
It refers to foundational concepts that are innate to human intelligence from early childhood, completely independent of acquired cultural knowledge or language. These are the underlying physics engines of the mind.
Give me an example.
For example, objectness. Does the AI truly understand that an object continues to exist even when it is temporarily hidden behind another object?
Object permanence.
Exactly. Does it understand bounded holes, basic collisions, and the fundamental physics of space?
Things a human toddler understands implicitly without ever reading a physics textbook?
Precisely. Another prior is goal-directedness. Can the system observe a sequence of events and distinguish between intentional goal-driven behavior and random chaotic noise? It also tests basic geometry, topology, and the abstract concept of numbers without relying on linguistic symbols.
It's removing the language crutch.
Yes. The ultimate goal of the ARC benchmark is to see if the AI can efficiently acquire entirely new skills and adapt to completely novel visual logic problems that it was never trained on. It is testing the capacity to learn rather than the capacity to regurgitate massive amounts of text data from the internet.
Which perfectly bridges our discussion from the philosophical definitions back down to the hard, undeniable reality of what these systems can actually do right now, today, in 2026. Because while we debate the definition of AGI, the actual capabilities are accelerating at a breakneck pace.
The capabilities are compounding.
Look at the timeline from OpenAI. Sam Altman's recent roadmap, established in late 2025, according to our sources, makes a very specific, aggressive claim. We will have highly capable AI research interns deployed this year in 2026. And by March 2028, the goal is to deploy fully autonomous AI researchers.
Not an assistant.
Not a glorified search engine, an autonomous researcher. Here's where it gets really interesting.
The distinction in terminology there is absolutely critical to understand. An intern, in a scientific context, helps you sort data, run preliminary statistical checks, and fetch literature. They execute tasks designed by someone else.
They do the grunt work.
Right. A researcher, however, conceptually designs the experiment from scratch. A researcher identifies the gap in the literature, formulates a novel hypothesis, designs the methodology to test that hypothesis, runs the simulation, and discovers net new knowledge.
That is a massive leap from an intern.
It is. And the reason OpenAI and the broader industry are pushing so incredibly hard in this specific direction is detailed in a fascinating January 2026 report from OpenAI titled AI as a Scientific Collaborator. The underlying premise of the report highlights a harsh, often ignored truth about modern science. Human research productivity is actually falling.
That feels incredibly counterintuitive. We have more technology, more funding, more universities, and better communication tools than at any point in human history. How can human scientific productivity possibly be falling?
It's a phenomenon economists refer to as the Moore's Law bottleneck of scientific discovery. As the sum total of human knowledge grows exponentially more complex, the frontier of understanding gets pushed further and further out.
It gets harder to find new things.
Exactly. Think about the polymaths of the 1700s. A single human brain could reasonably comprehend the entirety of advanced physics, chemistry, and biology known at the time. Today, that is biologically impossible. It takes a human being almost a decade of intense, hyper-specialized postgraduate study just to reach the starting line of a single, narrow subfield.
You spend your entire 20s just learning what everyone else already did, just so you can try to add one tiny brick to the wall in your 30s.
Exactly. And the OpenAI report points out a staggering, quantifiable statistic to illustrate this. It takes 18 times more human researchers today to sustain the historical doubling of computer chip density than it did in the 1970s.
18 times more people just to keep the same pace.
Yes, we are throwing exponentially more people, more time, and more capital at problems just to maintain the exact same historical rate of progress. Modern research has become intensely fragmented, siloed into hyper-specific disciplines, and fundamentally constrained by our biological cognitive limits. A human brain simply cannot hold the entire context of quantum mechanics, organic chemistry, and material science simultaneously to find the cross-disciplinary breakthroughs.
And that biological constraint is exactly where the AI steps in, not just as a tool, but as the ultimate high-throughput, cross-disciplinary collaborator.
That's the vision.
And the utilization numbers from ChatGPT in the hard sciences right now are wild. According to the internal analysis in our source stack, ChatGPT now sees 8.4 million weekly messages specifically focused on advanced hard science and complex mathematics.
8.4 million weekly.
And that specific use case grew by 50% just in the last year. Furthermore, there are roughly 1.3 million weekly users actively doing graduate level or professional research level work on the platform worldwide.
It's become a standard tool in the lab.
But they're interacting with the system in a totally different way. They're sending 12 times more complex coding and data analysis messages than your average user who is just asking for a gluten-free pancake recipe.
The data clearly shows that these specialized users are treating the AI as a highly available, deeply knowledgeable technical colleague. They're using it to debug intricate code structures, interpret complex genomic data, translate abstract theoretical ideas into rigorous mathematics, and synthesize massive, disparate bodies of scientific literature in seconds.
It's functioning as that intern we talked about.
Yes. But the reason the AI is suddenly getting so much better at this highly rigorous scientific work isn't just because it read more books. In late 2025 and early 2026, the biggest leap in capability has been driven by a fundamental shift in how the models compute. It's a mechanism called test-time compute, which the industry often colloquially refers to as slow thinking.
Slow thinking, it's such a great term.
Yeah.
Because usually the entire value proposition of software is speed. We want the AI to spit out the answer instantly the second we hit enter.
Right, the historical paradigm was instant inference. But with the deployment of models like the GPT 5.2 series, the architecture is fundamentally different. When presented with a complex problem, the system is designed to pause and spend significantly more computational power exploring the problem space before generating a single word of output.
So it's actively deliberating.
Exactly. It utilizes mechanisms akin to Monte Carlo tree search, where it explores thousands of alternative logical pathways, interrogates its own initial assumptions, generates intermediate hypotheses, and rigorously self-checks its work. It intentionally trades immediate speed for deep, verifiable, multi-step reasoning.
It's the difference between blurting out the first thing that comes to mind and sitting quietly with a whiteboard for an hour before answering.
That is a perfect way to visualize it.
And the results of this slow thinking architecture are undeniably staggering. Our sources show that GPT 5.2, utilizing this test time compute, achieved a flawless perfect score on the AGI 2025 exam.
A perfect score.
For context for you listening, that is the American Invitational Mathematics Examination, a test designed specifically to challenge the brightest high school mathematical minds in the country. And the AI got a perfect score without using any external tools, calculators, or web searches. Just pure internal slow thinking.
It is deeply impressive.
But even more impressive than a high school competition is the Frontier Math benchmark.
Yes, the Frontier Math benchmark is the true crucible right now. It is often referred to as the Google-proof benchmark in the research community.
Exactly. We have to explain this to the listener because it highlights the leap from calculation to discovery. Frontier math is a massive problem set specifically constructed by leading mathematicians to be so profoundly difficult that even a brilliant PhD student in mathematics couldn't solve a single problem in a few hours.
These aren't equations you can just plug into a calculator or Google the answer to. They require novel, creative mathematical leaps.
And GPT 5.2, utilizing slow thinking, successfully solved 40.3% of those deeply complex problems.
Which is a monumental paradigm-shifting leap. A 40% success rate on a PhD-level Google-proof benchmark proves that the system is definitively moving past the realm of competition-level pattern matching and firmly entering the realm of true mathematical discovery. It is generating logic that previously required a human lifetime of specialized study.
Now, I want to pause here and connect this directly back to you, the listener. You might be driving to work or sitting at your desk or doing the dishes right now, listening to us talk about vector spaces and math tests and thinking, okay, cool, the AI is really good at abstract math, good for the PhDs, but why should I fundamentally care about a 40% score on a frontier math benchmark?
It's a valid question.
Here is exactly why you should care. Because advanced mathematics and complex data analysis are the primary bottlenecks for saving human lives. The OpenAI report points out a sobering reality. The average time from discovering a viable target for a new pharmaceutical drug to actually getting that drug through regulatory approval in the United States is currently 10 to 15 years.
10 to 15 years is an agonizing, often fatal lag time for patients waiting for vital treatments.
It's too long.
It is, and that timeline becomes even more tragic when you consider the macro health data. Non-communicable diseases, things like stroke, heart disease, various forms of cancer, and diabetes, currently account for roughly 74% of all global deaths. The vast majority of human suffering is locked behind complex biological puzzles that currently take us a decade and a half to solve.
Exactly. This is the real-world application. If we have AI research interns functioning today and fully autonomous AI researchers capable of cross-disciplinary discovery by 2028, we aren't just talking about making our smartphone apps update faster or generating better marketing copy.
The stakes are much higher.
We are talking about compressing that 15-year drug discovery timeline down to 5 years, or 2 years, or maybe months. We are talking about utilizing test-time compute to model protein folding and molecular interactions at a scale human biology simply cannot achieve. We are talking about fundamentally altering the human lifespan and dramatically reducing the burden of global disease. That is the actual tangible stakes of an AI passing a math test.
It is the promise of initiating a new, unprecedented acceleration phase in human science. But if we connect this incredible promise to the bigger picture of the industry today, we also have to look rigorously at the friction.
Right. It's time to pivot.
It is vital to understand that it is not all smooth sailing. Despite the utopian visions of curing disease and the dizzying $110 billion funding rounds, the path to AGI is currently littered with massive technical and economic roadblocks.
Oh, absolutely. It is time for the reality check. Because if you look closely at the actual market data hidden in these reports, OpenAI, despite the massive valuation, is actually bleeding significantly in some key operational areas.
They are.
Over the past year alone, ChatGPT's overall market share has dropped from a dominant 86.7% down to 64.5%. That is a massive slide for a company that effectively invented the consumer category.
It's a very competitive landscape now.
They are actively trailing competitors like Anthropic in the highly lucrative, high-margin enterprise sector. And the infrastructural cash burn and the sheer cost of powering those data centers is so intense that OpenAI is even starting to test targeted user advertisements within the platform just to offset the operational costs.
That significant loss of market share, combined with the immense, creeping pressure to monetize the consumer base through advertising, reveals the inherent fragility of this specific moment in the AI boom.
It's a vulnerable transition period.
It is. And if you dive into the Reddit machine learning forums we source, you see exactly what the actual engineers, the people building these systems in the trenches, think about this. There is a deep, prevailing, and highly technical skepticism about the aggressive timelines to AGI being pushed by the CEOs.
What are they saying exactly?
One of the most prevalent theories currently dominating the discussion among users is the application of the software development curve to machine learning.
Yes. The classic 90-10 rule. Let's explain how the engineers are applying that to AI.
The concept of the 90-10 rule is simple, but historically brutal. In any complex software development project, going from 0% completion to 90% completion takes a certain predictable amount of time and resources.
The fast progress phase.
Right. But going from that 90% mark to that final, flawless, enterprise-ready 100% takes just as much time, if not significantly more, than the entire first 90%. When you hit that final 10%, you hit the boundary of edge cases, unforeseen structural limitations, and a massive wall of diminishing returns.
As one Reddit user brilliantly put it, it's exactly like leveling up your character in an RPG video game. Getting your character from level 1 to level 90 is incredibly fun, it feels fast, and you see massive leaps in capability every single day.
It's very rewarding.
But getting from level 92 to the max level of 99 is an absolute soul-crushing grind that takes hundreds of hours of repetitive effort just to see a tiny fractional improvement. And the technical community on Reddit is aggressively arguing that large language models, or LLMs, are currently hitting that exact grind.
They believe we are at that wall.
Yes, they are at level 92. And the math says level 99 might be functionally impossible with the current architecture.
That is the core technical debate defining the industry right now. Many highly respected experts and machine learning engineers strongly argue that large language models, acting alone, will never reach True artificial general intelligence.
Never. That's a strong word.
We have to remember what an LLM fundamentally is. It is an incredibly sophisticated, high-dimensional pattern-matching statistical machine. It predicts the next most likely token in a sequence based on the massive distribution of human language in its training data.
It's essentially super autocomplete.
Exactly. But crucially, it lacks a true world model. It has no embodied understanding of physical space, no intrinsic agency, no internal state of temporal continuity, and no actual self-generated goals.
Right. It's the Apple problem.
Elaborate on that.
The LLM doesn't actually know what an apple is. It has never tasted one, felt the weight of it, or watched it fall from a tree due to gravity. It just mathematically knows what words are statistically associated with the word apple across the internet.
Exactly. It operates entirely within the map without ever having visited the territory. And because of that fundamental architectural limitation, many researchers argue that simply scaling up the data, adding trillions more parameters, and throwing billions of dollars of compute at an LLM will eventually hit a hard wall of diminishing returns.
You can't reach the moon just by building a taller ladder. Eventually, you need a fundamentally different technology like a rocket.
That's a great way to put it. The frontier research suggests that to make that leap from 90% to 100%, we need hybrid architectures. We need to combine the linguistic fluency of LLMs with symbolic reasoning engines, true agent-like systems, or neuroscience-inspired recurrent neural networks that process continuous streams of time rather than static blocks of text.
So you have this fascinating dichotomy. On one side, you have the CEOs and the venture capitalists armed with a $110 billion war chest going on television and saying AGI is practically around the corner, maybe just 2 or 3 years away.
The hype cycle.
And on the other side, you have the engineers and the open source community in the trenches saying, hold on, we don't even have the right fundamental architecture yet. We are trying to build a skyscraper on a foundation made of predictive text.
It's a profound disconnect.
And while all this fierce technical and corporate debate is happening, the broader geopolitical world is rapidly waking up to the reality that AI is no longer just a quirky Silicon Valley experiment. It is a matter of critical national security.
Yes, the macro-level geopolitical shifts we are seeing in 2026 are just as dramatic, if not more so, than the corporate alliances. We have to look at how global governments are actively responding to this paradigm shift.
Bring us up to speed on the global stage.
For instance, looking at the macro data, the United Nations General Assembly recently took unprecedented action by appointing a 40-member independent international scientific panel on artificial intelligence.
40 members from around the world.
Yes. And this isn't a standard bureaucratic committee. This is a globally diverse group of the world's leading experts tasked with providing rigorous, independent, and impartial scientific insight into both the massive opportunities and the existential risks posed by AI.
I want to be very clear with you, the listener, here. We are impartially reporting on these governmental and UN actions. We are simply relaying the facts of these global initiatives. We aren't taking any political stance or endorsing any specific governmental policy.
Absolutely. We are just looking at the mechanics of the response.
Right. And it's fascinating to look at this purely from a geopolitical mechanics standpoint. The UN stepping in to create a panel of this magnitude shows how governments are viewing this, not as a consumer tech product, but as critical civilization-level infrastructure. Regardless of where anyone stands on the spectrum of regulation versus innovation, the sheer unprecedented scale of this governmental reaction tells you exactly how seriously they are taking the threat of falling behind in this specific arms race.
And that governmental reaction is translating into massive capital expenditure, particularly when we look at the rapidly exploding concept of sovereign AI.
Sovereign AI, that's a relatively new term.
It has become a massive new sector of the global economy almost overnight. If you look at NVIDIA's most recent earnings report in our sources, they revealed that their sovereign AI business sector tripled last year, generating a staggering $30 billion in revenue purely from nation-states.
Let's make sure the listener understands that, meaning AI infrastructure that is entirely owned, localized, and controlled by a specific nation-state.
Exactly. Countries like Canada, France, the Netherlands, Singapore, the UK, and many others are actively pouring billions of dollars of public funds into building their own local sovereign AI infrastructure.
So they aren't just renting server space in California?
No, they are treating AI not as a software subscription they buy from an American company, but as basic foundational national infrastructure. analogous to maintaining their own electrical grid, their own highway system, or their own telecommunications network.
That makes a lot of sense.
They are building localized data centers and training custom AI models specifically to protect their own citizens' data, enforce their own domestic laws, and ensure the AI operates according to their specific cultural customs and societal values, rather than relying on a corporate black box.
It makes complete logical sense when you think about the stakes. If AI is fundamentally going to run your nation's logistics, diagnose your citizens in hospitals, and manage your financial economy, you absolutely do not want the physical server sitting in a different country, subject to different geopolitical laws and foreign corporate whims. You want that server sitting securely in your own backyard.
Unique sovereignty over your own intelligence infrastructure.
Exactly. It just perfectly illustrates how 2026 is truly the year AI transitioned from a localized tech boom into a decentralized trillion-dollar global imperative.
It is fully transitioned. It is now a global infrastructural reality.
Okay, let's take a collective breath and summarize the immense scope of this deep dive. We started by looking at OpenAI's staggering $110 billion war chest and decoding the shifting tectonic plates of corporate alliances. Amazon's highly conditional escrowed billions designed to accelerate the timeline, Microsoft's extended IP rights past 2032, and NVIDIA's pivot to straight equity.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did. We wrestled with the incredibly complex definition of AGI itself, debating the merits of a $100 billion profit metric versus the profound Luminova-inspired idea that we might not even recognize AGI when it arrives because of our own deeply ingrained anthropomorphic biases.
We also looked closely at the very real, undeniable progress being made on the ground. The transition of AI from a conversational novelty to a high-throughput, slow-thinking scientific collaborator capable of perfect scores on advanced math benchmarks.
And potentially compressing a 15-year drug discovery pipeline. But we balanced that utopian promise with the harsh reality of market share drops, the grueling 90-10 software development curve hitting the limits of large language models, and the massive decentralized global push for sovereign AI infrastructure.
It's a complex, multifaceted picture.
And what this incredibly complex landscape means directly for you, whether you are managing a team of employees, studying for a university degree, or just trying to navigate the rapid changes in the modern world, is that the timeline of human capability is fundamentally compressing. The ongoing shift from interacting with an AI as a simple chatbot to collaborating with an intern in 2026 and potentially working alongside a fully autonomous colleague by 2028 will fundamentally alter how you gather, synthesize, and apply knowledge in your daily life.
The very nature of how human beings work is changing right now.
It is changing permanently. But as we look toward this rapidly approaching future of highly capable, perhaps even generally intelligent artificial colleagues, I want to leave the listener with one final, deeply profound concept drawn from the Luminova AI source material.
Yes, there's one philosophical point we haven't touched on yet.
Oh, I know exactly what concept you're going to bring up, and I absolutely love the philosophical implications of this idea.
It's the radical concept of intentionally designing an AGI with irreparable imperfections.
Irreparable imperfections.
Yes. If you think deeply about human nature, a vast amount of our meaning, our intrinsic motivation, our empathy, and our overarching sense of purpose comes directly from overcoming hardship. It comes from navigating failure, experiencing vulnerability, and dealing with the constant uncertainty of our own limitations.
It's the struggle that gives the victory its meaning.
Exactly. If an entity is flawlessly perfect, if it never struggles, nothing it achieves has intrinsic value. So the philosophical question becomes, will a mathematically perfect AI, one that meets every single goal flawlessly and instantaneously without effort, ever possess true, adaptable, general intelligence or a genuine understanding of the human condition?
That is a staggering thought.
In order to build a truly human-like colleague, an entity that understands value, risk, and meaning, might developers eventually have to artificially instill the capacity to fail, to suffer, and to struggle?
It is such a wild, beautifully tragic, and slightly terrifying thought that the final missing ingredient to creating true artificial life isn't a larger data set, and it isn't more billions of dollars of compute, but the programmed, undeniable ability to experience hardship.
It redefines what we are actually trying to build.
That is an absolutely incredible, mind-bending place to end. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. I truly hope it gave you some aha moments, helped you cut through the overwhelming noise of the current hype cycle, and equipped you for whatever the future holds. Take that thought about irreparable imperfections, mull it over, and we will catch you on the next one.